You are listening to episode 1. This episode is brought to you by QuickBooks. All right, everyone, let me tell you a little story about QuickBooks. So I've been using QuickBooks ever since I launched my business, and here's why. I got a degree in marketing at Edwards School of Business from my university in my home city, University of Saskatchewan, and accounting was by far my worst class. I was working so hard just to pass. And this made me worried because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have to have your books right. You have to be good with accounting. So I was talking to one of my friends who owned a teeth whitening business at the time. And she's like, yeah, use QuickBooks. That's one of the best apps you can use. My dad's a farmer and that's what he uses. And it's honestly super efficient and it makes it really easy to keep track. And honestly, since then, my books have always been great, and I've connected my accountant to it, and it's even more convenient for him because he told me it saves him a lot of time. So I definitely recommend this app. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. Welcome to the Okiki podcast, where we make inspirational people known. Brought to you by your host, Fiyin Obayan. Hello. Thank you so much for tuning in today for my very first podcast. First of all, I would like to say thank you for taking the time today to listen to what I have to say. I am so excited to share this adventure with you, to share my insights with you, and to share the interviews with my guests with you. Another thing I wanted to let you know is that in the link below, I have links to some goodies for you. So I have a free PDF that talks about 14 resources for new entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. So definitely take a look at that. You can click the link below. And also, if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, I actually have links to all the equipment I am using. So honestly, for this podcast I'm doing right now, this solo podcast, all I'm using is an H1 Zoom, and it's about $100 on Amazon. So I have the link below. If that's something you're interested in starting, you don't need crazy equipment to really get started on this podcast thing. And honestly, it's that easy. So I have the link below if you're interested. And I have some goodies below, as I mentioned before. And without further ado, let's move on with the show. Why do I love podcasts? Well, I actually have a long history with podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts since I was 15 years old. And it really started actually. I would listen to podcasts on like faith and spirituality, on emotional and mental health. And I found that it really helped me during like those kind of confusing periods in your life, going from teenhood to adulthood. And I just loved learning from experts. Sometimes it'd be like counselors online, different people. So I actually felt like these individuals putting on these episodes had very valuable input that they brought into my life. From there, during college, towards the end of my time there, I decided I think it'd be really nice to have a type of marketing, social media marketing consulting company that would serve small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses that needed help with marketing, but couldn't necessarily afford to hire a large firm. And I was particularly interested in the area of social media. This actually was so new that it was barely taught in my degree, which was a marketing degree from the Edwards School of Business. So I remember being a little frustrated about that, but that was kind of the general notion for a lot of the marketing programs in the country at the time. So it was just so new. And so therefore, I was trying to look for a place, some sort of database where I could learn about these things. And I looked up social media marketing and came across the Social Media Marketing Examiner. And they had a plethora of blogs, podcasts, and they actually did yearly conferences just for social media. So listening to their podcasts were amazing because they would have experts who would be experts in different platforms. So they bring in people who are like, oh, this girl is the queen of LinkedIn, or this lady's the queen of Instagram. This guy is the king of Snapchat. Like all these experts basically in their field. And they would bring them on and have them educate their audiences through the many formats that they provided. So that was really awesome. And that actually helped me get more knowledge in the area of social media marketing. And particularly in recent times, I listened to this podcast that featured a guest, Goldie Chan. One of the things that I was starting to discover was that because of my type of business being very much B2B, helping small businesses and medium-sized businesses with their marketing, I was wanting to find more ways to reach those audiences. And I was kind of feeling stuck in some ways in how to grow, just trying to get different ideas. And of course, you got to remember too, I started this business right out of college. So it was definitely like something I was passionate about, but I wouldn't ever have I won't pretend like I knew everything right off the bat. I kind of just jumped right into it. So on this particular day I was listening, they were featuring the guest Goldie Chan, and they called her the Oprah of LinkedIn. Now, if you know anything about LinkedIn, it's typically the platform where you expect and it still is a platform where you expect to find a lot of people with, white collar jobs. There's some blue collared on there, of course, but a lot of execs, CEOs. And yeah, so you don't really expect someone who's, a millennial with bright green hair to be the number one LinkedIn voice on that platform, when that platform generally has a much older audience. I was super interested to find out about this girl and how she managed to do what she did. And it was really cool to hear her story and her personal brand. So that particular podcast actually got me plugged into LinkedIn, using it more effectively, especially video. That was something I hadn't really done on LinkedIn before. And because I was dealing with a B2B audience, she basically convinced me that's where I should be. So that's why I think podcasts are great. They can be life-changing. They could actually bring in aspects of information that can really help you make some really good decisions in the areas you want to grow in. Another one that really has helped me a lot is the Gold Digger podcast with Jenna Kutcher. She has an amazing podcast. It has up to 200, almost 300 episodes at this point, and it's just so good. Whether it's her solo episodes or guest episodes, she just gives so much knowledge. And I actually very much enjoy her solo episodes because she tends to go really in depth. I love when she'll do these episodes where she's actually coaching people inside the episode. So you're learning along with the person she's coaching, who's actually a member of her insider group. And it's just really cool to kind of hear how she processes and how she teaches people. It's a really neat experience to listen to. You learn so much as a business owner from those episodes. So yeah, I think that's why I love podcasts. Another thing about myself is I realize I prefer long form content and rich content as opposed to short form. So I guess what I mean by that is I'd rather watch a 2-hour movie than watch a whole series. All those people that like to talk about binge watching Netflix. I am not one of those people. This actually kind of drives my little sister crazy because she can watch several episodes of a show she likes. And I used to binge. Shows on regular TV. But I think as I got older and I wanted to actually, create things and be more productive in my life, it's actually really hard for me to sit still and think of the idea of binging something like that. I would rather be productive and have those periods of time that I blocked off for relaxing or doing something enjoyable. So for me, actually, I prefer going on nature walks in the nature paths near our house. And I find that's a really good way for me to declutter my mind and relax. So for me, that's kind of a form of recreation. Not to say I don't watch some shows, but I just cannot do that 8 episode in a row thing. That's just not for me. I felt really challenged by this one social media thinker, and she actually founded the organization of Boss Babe, but she walked away from her own business because she had basically built up a brand, and then at one point she didn't feel like she was representing it anymore, or that it really was where she wanted to be. So Alex Wolf, that's her name, she was the founder of that, and she had this really interesting mini documentary where she talked about social media and how visual it is and how our eyes are so stimulated nowadays, and kind of like ideas around working other senses of our body. So it was really interesting to me, and it challenged me to get more into like reading books and listening to podcasts, just to kind of train those other areas as well. And so yeah, I'll put that information in the show notes, but I found it to be very interesting. And yeah, so I find that when you take in long form content, rich content, I feel like you just walk away like you got something out of it, like a really good meal or something like that. So why did I want to create a podcast? Because I felt like podcasts actually had the ability to change lives. I had seen the way that listening to people, influential people, knowledgeable people had actually had impacts on my life. And I wanted to extend that to others. At the same time, I also realized I'm a very curious person. So before I really kind of got back into Okiki and doing content with Okiki, I had been doing an 8-month contract with a really great company in my city, and I was actually very much enjoying it. It was 8 months because it was a grant position, and I really loved the team that I got to work with. I loved getting used to working with a team, and I never thought I'd like actually working for somebody, if that sounds funny, like because I knew I wanted to start my business, but because it was just a nice office, a great company culture, I just felt like this was an awesome environment for me. And I thought, okay, I could do this. I could work with companies like this company and have my business on the side. During my time there, I actually got really curious because we would have these board meetings and everyone would kind of bring reports based on their departments. And I was just sitting there at the beginning wondering, okay, what is their area and what exactly are they up to and how does this all work together? And so it took me a while to actually fully understand what the company was about as I had joined them. Just because it covered so many different types of areas, everything from putting on showcases for members to investment programs to educational things that they had going on to working with students. So it was just such a multifaceted company that I knew I had to learn more in order to be of any assistance to them. So in my curiosity, I wanted to interview the different members of the team. But the cool part was I thought that this could actually be valuable information that they could also put on their website and on their social media platforms. And that's exactly what happened. It was really great because I ended up understanding more of what the organization was about because I interviewed individual members of the team and asked them about when they joined and why they're passionate about their role and what exactly they do. It was also good for outside viewers who were watching the content online via LinkedIn or the website or the YouTube channel because some people had been working alongside of them because they're in similar industries and they were getting a better understanding of what the organization was about. So I found a way to not only answer my personal questions, but answer some questions that may have been echoed by others. And so it was a way of serving. And that's what I'm hoping that this podcast would really do for you, is answer some questions that you may have along the way, whether you're an artist or creative, that this would be helpful to you in that way. So here are some surprising benefits I found from starting a podcast. I was really surprised by how much it impacted me personally, just by getting the opportunity to interview these individuals and feel like they were so close. Some of them were not actually in the same city as me, but even through video chat and just seeing the person as a person in a sense, because even video chat is a little bit closer than nothing, right? Than just like being on the phone. And seeing their reactions and hearing their stories, it really made that dream seem that much more tangible to me. And it felt like less of a distant person that you just see on a TV show or on a on a social media ad who's talking about their success. And it was actually someone who was relatable, someone who was like, oh, I could actually meet this person. And so I felt like by that personability of that experience, it really made me be able to picture myself achieving some of the goals that they were talking about as well. And I knew that if that happened to me just through interviewing them, that would definitely happen and hopefully happen for my audience members in listening to this as well. And another benefit is that because you have long form content, it gives you loads of content to post as a marketer, as a personal brand. So for me, it created loads of content that I can now use in many of my platforms because I can chunk this long form of information I now have and use it in various formats. And I encourage that for anyone. If it's not podcasting for you, maybe it's a long form of a YouTube video, or maybe you don't want to post those things, but you just want to make content. I encourage you to honestly take out a voice recorder and just kind of ramble about your different ideas and thoughts and see if you could even take pieces from that and use that as content in your different platforms and what you're working on. So that has been a major benefit of starting this podcast. And finally, who's this podcast for? Well, this podcast is for aspiring entrepreneurs and creatives because those are the people I have been interviewing. I have people who have started businesses, I have models, I have clothes designers coming up, and there's just so many cool creative people that will be on this podcast, and I know that you will enjoy it. So thank you so much for tuning into this first episode. Remember, if you like the podcast, subscribe and leave me a rating. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any suggestions too, be sure to email me at info@okikiconsulting.com. And yes, if you are an aspiring entrepreneur and a creative, and even if you feel like you're neither and you just love good content, check out this podcast, the Okiki podcast, making inspirational people known.